Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this macrame coloured leaves technique. And this is the piece that I'm working on today to show you. So as you can see, this is the result, and I've turned this one into a bracelet. Like so. So you could quite easily just make it like this. But this is mostly to show you the technique. And I want to show you a few other things that I've used this technique for. I've made this bracelet as well, where I've used it around the sides and then broken up the middle with a flower and some gemstones. And then lastly, this is also the technique that I use for my macrame tree of life. So as you can see, it's that technique that I use for the leaves. So, if you want to learn how to do this, then stay tuned. And these are the things that we'll be using. You'll need a scissor to cut whatever cord or thread you're using, and then some kind of cord or thread. It can really be anything that you've got or that you can find, but in my case I'm using some nylon cord, and it's roughly about a 0.3mm thick. And I just have a selection of colours. I like to work with 5 colours in total, so one of them is going to be like the base colour, and the rest, the other 4 colours, are going to be the colours that fill in the leaves, and I'll kind of explain that as we go. And then on top of that, I'm going to be working on this board, where I then have my pins to stick in to help hold my work down. So get your things together and then let's get started. So now the first thing you need to do is get your cords ready. And in my case, I'm using this colour as my base colour. So that's the one I need to get ready now. And I've already cut some lengths off. The first one is, you just want a short length. This can technically be anything, but I just usually keep it the same colour as the base colour. Just a short length, nothing special. This is just to tie all your other cords onto. So just a short length like that. And then you need to cut off 12 lengths of your base colour, and each thread or cord, if you're using about this size of thread, in my case they're about 1.5 meters to 2 meters long, and you need 12 of them. But keep in mind that each of these cords are going to be attached to that one, doubled over, so each of these is going to work like 2 when we're working with them. So that's why they need to be quite long. And obviously the length of them varies depending on what piece you're making, what you're going to end up making, the thickness of your cord. So it's really just a rough guideline. But rather do a bit too much so you can cut something off at the end, because you really don't want to run out. Rather have too much. So get all your cords ready, or your threads, and then I'll show you how to set it up. So the first thing you need to do is get out your short length, the one that you're going to be attaching all your cords to, and on each end I'm just going to tie a regular knot. This is purely so we're able to attach it to the board, because you can't really, most of the time you can't just stick straight through your thread or your cord. It'll kind of just work its way out. It's better if you just make a knot to then put your pin or whatever you're using down through the knot. So you want to make your knots and then get your pins and attach it to your board, and make sure when you attach it, the second one, that it's stretched out quite taut. Like so. Now that's nice and tight. So the next thing you want to do is get your long lengths of thread or cord out, the ones you've already cut off, and then you want to fold them over, double them over, so you have this loop at about the middle. And now we need to attach all these to this cord. And to do this, we're going to use what's called a lax head knot. Technically it's a reverse lax head knot, but this is the one I prefer to use. So what you do is you keep hold of your loop, which is the middle of your long thread, and you feed that underneath the thread you put across and attach to your board. And then you take your loop back around, put your fingers through, and then pull your ends through that loop. And now that is technically attached, and that's a lark's head knot. Now what we need to do though is we need to make a lark's head knot with some half hitches. So you've done this already, and now we just need to do an extra time basically. So when you're looking at your knot, your cords or threads are kind of naturally coming out to each their own side. So stick with that. So the one to the right, you then want to get the end of that and then put it back around that base thread and stick it back around the top, back underneath, and then the loop that you create down here with the rest of your cord, you want to make sure that you pull your end through that. So when you're pulling it tighter, you have something that looks like this, and when you pull that, you just created a half hitch on the side of your lark's head knot. And you want to do the same thing on the other side. Get the end of that on the left side, feed that underneath your first holding thread, and then pull it through that loop, remember that, because that's how you get it to stay tight, and then tighten that, like so. And that is your first thread attached. And you can then move that to the side, out of the way, while you keep attaching the other ones. So I've attached my first thread, and I'm now going to do another one, just to show you one more time up close. So you get your long piece of thread or cord, fold it over in half, so the half is about your loop, and then you feed the loop underneath the very first thread you attach to the board. In other words, kind of the holding thread, you can call it. And you take the loop back around so it looks kind of like this, and then you put your fingers through and grab the ends, and then pull your ends all the way through. And then as you pull it tighter, it looks roughly something like this. And then you want to pull that all the way tight, like so, and that's your reverse lark's head knot. And now, like we did before, we need to do a half hitch on each side. So you get the end, again split them up, so the one furthest to the right, you keep on the right side, get the end of that, and then feed that end back underneath, so it's coming out from below, going back around, and then back from above and feeding it underneath your thread again, your holding thread. And make sure that you take that end out through the loop on the bottom here, like so, so that when you pull it tight, it'll stay in place. Same thing on the other side. Get the end of your left side, feed that back from above and underneath, and then pull that so you can tighten it, like so, and then pull it all the way tight. And you can just pull them both together so you make sure it's nice and tight and it sits on there properly. So that's now my second one attached, and you just keep going like this, attach all of them in this same way, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now set up all my threads, so all 12 threads are doubled over, so that makes 24, and as you can see I've just sectioned them into the groups. So you need 6 threads for each leaf, which then in this case, because you have 12 threads in the beginning, which is then doubled over to make 24, it's going to give you 4 leaves wide basically. You can easily make it wider or even narrow if you want to. You just attach more threads in the same way, and obviously you want to make sure that you do it in groups of 6 threads because each leaf needs that amount. If you have any doubts about the basic knots that we'll be using, I'm going to link to my basic macrame knots video in the description box, so that can be a bit helpful. Otherwise, I'm then going to show you how to start. So we start off with making one leaf at a time, and like I said, I've grouped them into the amount of threads that we need for each leaf, and I'm just going to start from the left side. So I'm just going to push the others out of the way just to try and make it less confusing to look at. So we're just focusing on one leaf to begin with. So here you have your 6 threads, and then you just need to separate them out. So you want to start with your furthest right ones. As you can see, that's the furthest. These are coming from the same thread, and this doubled over, and then it makes it into 2. So what you want to make sure is to grab the very right one. You can tell when you separate them out which one is which, and then that one you want to get and then bring over towards the other side, so over all the other threads, because that's going to be our first holding cord. And then the others are then coming out from underneath, and you now want to start making the leaf shape. So we grab the very next thread, which is this one that I just separated out, and what we want to do now is we want to start doing some half hitches. So we're holding the holding thread. In this case I'm holding it in my left hand, and then the working thread is going to be the one coming from underneath. And as you go along, make sure to always grab the very next thread, so just make sure you separate them out before you grab them. But we take the first one, you take it over your finger and then through the loop. So you end up with something about like this. So the holding thread is that one, and then you have your working thread coming from underneath, looping around the top, back underneath, and then through that loop. And then you want to pull that tight all the way up to where the threads are coming out. And you want to do that again, over your finger and through the loop. You end up with the same. It's almost like a 6. And for every thread that you have and you make knots with, you want to make 2 half hitches with each. So that's the first one. Put that out of the way. So then we want to grab the next one. So let's just find the right one. The next pair, separate them out to make sure you grab the right one. So this is my very next one. Again, take your holding thread back above the others. So we're now focusing on these 2. And this is my working thread. Again, coming out underneath my holding thread. Take it over your finger and through the loop. And then pull that tight over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight. Now what you'll need to start doing now is you want, because obviously you need a leaf shape, so you want it to start graduating a bit downwards to actually make the shape. Sometimes in a way it kind of happens a bit naturally, but you do need to help it along. The way that you do that is your holding thread. That's the one that determines basically where your knots are going. So if you're making a row of knots, your holding thread is what determines the direction or the shape of it. So that's why whenever you're making your half hitches onto your holding thread, it's the direction that you hold your thread in that determines it. So I've made 2 of that one, put that out of the way, grab the next one, still coming underneath. So what basically it's starting to do is in a way making a little bit of triangle shape. The top row is where you attached your threads, and then we're coming down at an angle. So then you want to do the same thing again, make a half hitches over your finger and through the loop. And as you can see, the way I'm holding my holding thread down at an angle, we want to make sure to do that. One more time, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that. Put it out the way, and then we reach the last pair. So we want to separate them out, grab the right one, put your working thread underneath your holding thread, so again like this, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight, still graduating downwards with your holding thread, over your finger and through the loop, still making your half hitches, and then grab the very last one, over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten. And there you basically have the first side of your leaf. So now what we need to do is start filling it in. So to do that now, what we need to do is get out one of our other colours of whatever thread or cord you're using. You can obviously use the same colour, you don't have to use a different colour. This is just what I'm showing you. And then get your scissors as well. And all you need to do is cut a small length of this off. It's hard to say specifically how long. Obviously it also depends what size thread you're using. But just something maybe roughly like 20 centimeters, if that. Mainly it's just to have enough so you can work with it, you know, the ends and that, so it doesn't get too short while you're working with it. That's really the thing, because you won't be using much of it for the actual knots and the actual piece. So now we have that cut off, and as you can see, all our threads are coming out underneath, coming out from that row that we've just made of knots, the one that's coming down at an angle. So now again we just want to separate them out, make sure we don't mix any of the threads up, and again you want to go back to working with your first two threads. So what you want to do is the second one in, so not the first one but the second one in, this is where you want to attach your short length of thread. In my case I'm just using a yellow for this one. So we do this by again using a lark's head knot, and it's just the exact same way that we attached it at the beginning, but just a single lark's head knot, not the half hitch on the side. So you've doubled it over again in half, so you have that loop at the top. Put the loop underneath your long thread, stick your fingers through, pull your ends through that loop, and then you have something roughly like this that you then pull tight, and you push it all the way up so it goes right below the previous row, basically as far up as it'll go. And then now what we need to do is close this in and basically start forming the other side of the leaf. To do that we want to go back to the very first one, not the one you just attach your thread to, but the very first one. Do the same thing as before, bring that over from the right to the left if that's the direction you're working in, and then that's your holding cord now. The one where you just attach the short thread is your working cord, and all you do is the same thing that you did before. So you put that over your finger and through the loop, like so, and then you pull it tight. And now that will go to meet up with the beginning of the previous row you did. Again, over your finger and through the loop, like so. And it's basically now closed in this thread that you just attached, so that won't come undone now or anything. So the next thing we need to do now is take one of our take the very next thread coming from the previous row, so back to the long ones, separate them out to make sure you grab the right one, and now you want to start filling in your leaf even more. So you bring this long thread above, in my case, the yellow that you just attached, because now that's your holding thread, and these short ones, which originally was one but it's turned into two because of the way we attached it, those are your working threads. So again, like the first time we attached, you can tell when you attach in your lark's head knot, your two threads are kind of naturally coming out to each their own side. So just stick with that. So you take the one that's coming out first, and you put that around your finger and through the loop, like so. So again, you get your 6, and then you push or pull that all the way up to the very beginning of that cord, so straight underneath the previous row that you did, both ways, and you want to make sure that the rows are as close as you can get them to each other. And we do the same thing again, over your finger and through the loop. So like I said, we always make 2 half hitches with each thread, and you want to grab the next one of the short ones over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, like so. So we've now created the next row of basically filling in the leaf, the one right underneath the first one. And now what we need to do is close off this row. So you can put them to the side to not get confused. So you go back to the thread that you used before, which was originally from the very beginning, but remember you've already done it once, and that you put to the side. So don't take that one, make sure you grab the right one, and that's going to be your holding cord again. And then this one that you just created this row with is your working thread. So take that around your finger and through the loop, and then push it tight around your finger and through the loop, and pull it all the way up. Make sure it's nice and tight. And again, put that to the side, we're done with that one. So you've now got 2 rows filled in the leaf. So as you might have guessed, we need to move on to the next thread now, from the very first row. So you go back to your long threads from there, separate them out, make sure you grab the right one, like so. Put the others out of the way so they don't get mixed up. And again, you want this one to come above your short ones. So that's your holding thread, your short ones are your working thread. You take that around your finger and through the loop, and again all the way up around your finger and through the loop, like so. So we're now working on the third row. We've done the first short thread, so we now need to do the other one. Over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. And again we need to close this in, so we go back to the original thread, original first one, the one that we've been making the row underneath the leaf with the whole time. That's your holding thread. This one coming from the row you just did inside the leaf is your working thread. Take that over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight, and then put that to the side. And as you might be able to tell as you work, as you're doing this, your shape that you're making now is kind of graduating from a point and outwards, because we've now reached the middle point and we now need to go back in again to take it back inwards to create that leaf shape like that. So that's why you began by attaching your short thread. You did that with a lark's head knot, which kind of equals making 2 half hitches. But then because you're getting 2 threads out of that, you're making 2 half hitches with each. That makes 4 half hitches. So that's how you get the graduation outwards. But now, go back to getting a long thread from the very first row. And we now need to make the last row inside the leaf. And because we need to graduate inwards again, we need to leave a thread out. So I usually like to leave out the first one. You can also use the first one, leave out the second one. I just normally prefer to leave out the first one. And then just skip that, put it out of the way to not get confused about it. And now you just take the very next one of the short ones, put it over your finger and through the loop, and then tighten it, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. And now you can help it along a little bit, make sure that it kind of sits in the middle of the other rows. But it will probably kind of happen a bit naturally, but just make sure. And then we need to cage that in again. So again, we're back to the holding thread, the original one, and then the working thread over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that. And now put that one aside, and now that's all that's left to do is basically close off the leaf. And then to do that, we basically just make another row, but now we want to leave out both of your short threads, your coloured thread if you're using a different colour. And make sure that when you leave them out that you push them underneath all your other threads, because that means they'll be coming out at the back. And then this will be your front part. So we're now left with these 2 long threads at the bottom, and that's what we're going to use to close it off. So what we need to do is the same thing that we've done to close all the other rows off. You take that one from the top row, bring it underneath, and the one from the bottom is above. And you just continue making your half hitches over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that. And that is basically your first leaf done. So what you'll be able to see is that you have that graduation from a point outward to the middle and back into a point, basically the leaf shape. So that's how you do that. So that is your first leaf done, and now we need to move on and create another one. So what you can just do, because this is the first row, none of them are attached yet, so you can just push this out of the way if you want to, over to the side, and then you need to grab your next set to get ready to make the next leaf. So make sure you grab your next 6 threads, and then you can bring them into the middle. And again, you want to separate them out. Make sure you grab the very first 2 threads to work with. And you can work from the other side. I'm going to show you that in the next row. So you can start from the other side. This is just how I've started it off now. And then the very first one is the one you bring over all the others. So that's your holding cord throughout this whole row. The one coming underneath, the very next thread, you take over your finger and then pull it through the loop. So you have something that looks roughly like this. So the holding cord is a straight one, and the working cord is the one that kind of forms the 6. And then you pull this up tight, all the way up to where the cords are meeting, and then again over your finger and through the loop to make your second half hitch. So like I said, remember, always do 2. And then you can put this working thread out of the way for now, So then you now need to grab the next one and remember then your working thread, bring it underneath your holding thread and then take that around your finger and through the loop and pull it tight around your finger and through the loop and pull it tight. Remember what I said from before, you need to go, this row that you're making now of knots, you need that to go like an angle out from the top row where you attach your cords or your threads, and that's what your holding thread, where you hold that when you're tightening your knots, that's what determines where you go. So just try and remember that and try and get it to go in the direction that you want it to go. So grab the next one, bring it underneath your holding thread, over your finger and through the loop. So you get your 6, reverse 6, and then if you can see the angle that I'm holding my holding thread at, over your finger and through the loop and tighten that so they're both tightened together. Put it out the way, grab your next thread, this is your last pair, and then bring it underneath, over your finger and through the loop, tighten it, over your finger and through the loop and tighten it. Put it out of the way, and the last one, over your finger and through the loop and tighten it, over your finger, through the loop and then tighten it. So that's the top row done. So the first one side of your leaf, and as you can see again it's almost like a triangle. You have this row that you've just done coming down at an angle from the top row. Don't worry about when you're making this, if you're worried that it's not curving like the leaf needs to, you don't worry about this point. That won't happen until you fill out your leaf and make the other side. At this point you just want to make sure that you have an angle at it. So now we're back to the point when you start filling in the leaf. So again, I cut off a length of the colour that I'm using. In this case I'm using an orange one. Just a short length like before. And then you want to separate your threads out again. Put some of them out of the way and just grab your first two ones from the right. Just skip the first one for now, because then this thread, the short one you just cut off, you want to attach to the second one in, like so. So I folded it over in half, got the loop, put the loop underneath the long base thread, put your fingers through the loop and pull your ends through. So you get roughly what looks like this. A bit like a pretzel shape. And that's just the lark's head knot that I explained before. That's what's often used in attaching threads or cords in macrame in general, so it's a good one to know. So you attach that, push it all the way up, it won't go any further, and then you need to cage that in. So you go back to your very first thread, bring it over this one, and then take the working thread where you attach the shorter one around your finger and through the loop, and then you have this loop, the reverse 6 again, and you tighten that all the way up to the beginning of the row. The second one, around your finger and through the loop, and tighten that. And then put this one, your working thread, out of the way, and you now have your colour attached to this leaf. So we move on, grab the next one of the long ones. Make sure you always grab the very next one. Don't let them cross over if you can avoid it. Make sure it comes above your coloured threads, the short ones, and then you grab the very first one and then put it around your finger and through the loop, around your finger and through the loop, and tighten them both. And then take the very next one, around your finger and through the loop, tighten it, around your finger and through the loop, and tighten it all the way up, like so. And that's basically your next row. So we're back to wanting to cage this row in. So we'll bring the original first thread above this one. You bring your working thread around your finger and through the loop, and tighten it, around your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. And what you'll notice is when you finish off a row, you cage in a row, that'll help tighten up the actual rows that you're making to fill out the leaf as well. So that'll help make it look a bit neater if you think it looks a bit loose. Moving on to the next one, the very next long one from the top row. Bring it over your two shorter threads. You take the very first one, around your finger and through the loop, so you get your 6. Tighten that. What you want to just be careful with when you tighten these to fill out the leaf, you don't want to pull really tight because you might make the knots flip, you know, the knots that you made to create the first half of the leaf, the first side of it. So just pull it with a nice tension, not too tight but obviously not too loose. So you want to make the second half hitch, round your finger through the loop and tighten that. The very next of the coloured threads, around your finger and through the loop, tighten it, around your finger, through the loop, and tighten it. And that's your third row inside the leaf. So we're back to wanting to cage that row in. So we grab the holding thread that creates the row on this side, and then your working thread is the one you just attached all your cords to, your threads, around your finger and through the loop. So you get your reverse 6 again, and then tighten that, around your finger and through the loop, pull that tight, that's your second half hitch, and then put this working thread out of the way. So we're now down to the last 2 from the original row, and you might, when you do the very last row, this is basically the last thread that you made a knot with on the very first row. You might want to always just kind of double tighten that before you start making your row. But then remember from before, because this is the last one, we need to then graduate inwards again. So that means we need to leave one out. So I'm just going to leave the first one out. Remember to bring it underneath your other thread so it stays at the back, because we'll finish them off at the end. And then just grab the next one, put it over your finger and through the loop, tighten that. Now this is the row you want to tighten this the most gentle, because this is most prone to where your knots can flip. It's not a big deal if it does flip, just kind of pull the opposite thread and it will unflip again, but obviously you kind of want to sort it out before you continue. Over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that. And then to finish off this row, flip around your threads again, you have them in the right position. So take your working thread over your finger through the loop to tighten off this row, over your finger and through the loop, and then pull that up. Put it to the side, and then we're completely done with the colours. So you want to also push this one away again underneath all your other threads to make sure they stay behind. And then you're left with these two at the very tip of your leaf, which we need to use to close it off. So the one coming from the top row is going to be your working thread, which you need to bring underneath the other one, just like we've been doing the whole time. We're just not putting any coloured thread on that. And then your holding thread is the same one that you've done the whole time. So you take your working thread around your finger and through the loop, and again, like always, get your reverse 6, and then you want to tighten that around your finger and through the loop for the second half hitch, and tighten that like so. And when you're tightening your knots as well, make sure that you hold your holding thread pretty taut. Obviously don't pull it, but hold it nice and straight, because that makes sure that you kind of get the tension right. So that's basically your second leaf. So if I bring the other one back, you then have two side by side, and then all you do is continue. You can push these to the side now if you want to. Grab out your next set, so your next 6 threads, and bring them out to the middle. And then all you do is continue with that. Do exactly the same thing as on the other ones. And obviously in this case I'm doing 4 leaves. The width of it, you can do more, you can do less. This is just the width I've done for this bracelet. So yeah, just continue like that. Finish off this row however many you choose to do, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now made all my 4 leaves and I've finished off this row. So now what we need to do is move down and start the next row. So what you'll probably notice, both now but especially as you keep going, is because you're doing the leaves like this and you're putting coloured thread in, all the thread that you're using for that, you're only using 1 thread per leaf basically, you know, these colours. So as you're going, especially if you keep going, it might start to look very confusing and you have thread all over the place. That's why just as you go, like now, separate all those out of the way, and I like to just get like another pin out or something and just make sure that I pin them so they stay out of the way. So that way they're kind of clear for me to keep working without them being too much in the way. So to make the next row, we're still doing the exact same thing, like form the leaves in the exact same way, except we're doing it opposite. So here you have the leaves from the top going to the bottom, moving towards the left. The next row it'll be from the top moving towards the bottom, towards the right. And what you need to do as well is you're still using groups of 6 threads for each leaf, but because also these, the first row, they're separate still, we also need to make sure that they get tightened together basically, so it all becomes one piece. So what you need to do is separate out your cords or threads. So the first 3 from your very first leaf, the very first 3 threads, make sure you grab the very first 3 ones. Grab them and put them out of the way. You're going to leave them to the side. Then you need to grab your next 3 threads, so the last 3 from your first leaf, pull them out, then grab your very first 3 threads from the next leaf over, and then put the rest out of the way to the side. So you now have 6 threads here, and those other 6 threads you're now going to be using to shape and make your next leaf. So like I said, we're basically doing the exact same thing like before, but we're just moving the other way. So before we would have grabbed the very 2 threads that are furthest to the right, but because that's what we did before, we now need to start from the left. So grab the 2 threads furthest to the left side, and then you need to first make the first row on the top side of your leaf. So you then want to take the very first thread and take it over the other ones, and then the one coming out underneath, the very next one, is your working thread. So now you want to start making your half hitches again. So you just do the same thing, over your finger, through the loop, and then pull that all the way up, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it all the way up, like so. So you've now started the very top row of this leaf. So put that to one side, and then you want to grab your very next thread, and this is still coming out of the first leaf. This is the last thread on the first leaf. Now you want to use that as your working thread, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it all the way up tight. Now what you need to do when you're making this row is, again, you need to come down at an angle, but the other way than before. And basically what you want to do is move down towards the tip, the bottom tip of the next leaf. And the reason for this is, the next thread that we now grab is the very first one from the very next leaf. And this is how we're going to make sure that they're knotted together to form one piece. So you grab that, and that's your working thread, over your finger and through the loop, pull it tight, over your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight. And as you're making this one, you've now basically attached these two leaves together. Moving on, finishing off this row, grab the very next thread. So this is the second to last one in total, and the second to last one we have from this leaf that we've separated out. Over your finger and through the loop, pull it up, over your finger and through the loop, getting your sixes again, and pull it up tight. And then the very last one, over your finger, through the loop, pull it tight, over your finger, through the loop, and pull it tight. So that is now forming the top side of the first leaf on this row. So just try and keep all the other threads out of the way, because that's what can make it a little bit confusing. But just do your best to kind of keep them in order. And now we need to get to the part where we want to start filling in this leaf. Now this is where my choice in colour comes in. As you can see on the first row, I started out showing you 5 colours. One of them I'm using as my base colour, that are my long threads throughout, and the other 4 are going to be the ones I'm going to use to fill in my leaves. Now the reason that I'm using 4 is because that's really the best amount of colours. You can obviously more of that, but at least that's the smallest amount of colours if you want to make sure that you never have the same colour touching each other. And that's what I kind of try and achieve. I don't lay out a specific pattern beforehand, like this colour is going to go so and so, that leaf and that leaf and that leaf. It's more I kind of do it as I go. I just make sure, say in this leaf now that I need to fill in, I don't want that to be yellow and I don't want that to be orange, because that leaf is touching those 2 colours. So I want to either make it red or pink. And I'm probably going to go for the pink in this one because it's furthest away. And then the next one I'm probably going to go for a yellow, because that is not touching, those 2 leaves won't be touching. So that's kind of the only way I do it regarding the colour pattern, and that's the reason that I'm using 4 colours. But obviously you can choose to do it however you want. It would look just as nice with less or even more colours as well. That's just my preference. So I've gotten my pink thread ready, because that's the one I'm going to fill in on this leaf. So I now need to separate out my threads again, grab the very first 2, put the others a bit out of the way, and then you need to take the second one in, so not the very first one, but the second one, and attach your colour to that. So again, fold it over in half, get the loop, put your fingers through the loop and then pull the ends through, and then push it all the way up as far as it'll go. And then again, we need to cage that row in. So we switch these two cords around, or threads, to have the furthest one, the very first one, be your holding thread, and that'll go above all your threads along this row. And the other one, you want to take around your finger and through the loop, and then pull that up. Now the first row that I'm doing here, I usually always do that just a little bit more carefully, just because it's the very first one, just to make sure everything stays where it needs to go. So that's the first one, and then that working thread, put it out of the way so you don't get confused, and then go and find your very next one. Sure it's the very next one, keep the others out of the way, and then lay that over your coloured thread, and then grab the very first one of them. So your long one, your base colour, is your holding thread, and these two, the coloured ones, the short ones, are your working threads to make the very next row. So over your finger and through the loop, and again over your finger and through the loop, and repeat with the next one. And this is again where we're graduating outwards, because we're going from the tip towards the middle, and then when we reach the middle we're going back, graduating inwards towards the bottom tip of the leaf, like so. Now that's that row. We need to cage in that row, so we flip your two threads around again to have your holding thread on top, the other one around your finger and through the loop, and then pull it tight around your finger and through the loop, and pull it tight, and again out of the way with that one. So when I move on, grab the very next one, lay it over your two coloured threads to create the next row, over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, next one over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, like so. And then to finish off this row, flip your threads around, over your finger and through the loop, tighten that, over your finger and through the loop, making sure you're still getting your sixes when you do the hair pitch, and tighten that. And as you might be able to see now, my work is moving quite a bit because it's only attached on the sides here. So because now I have done a bit of work, I have something I can stick some pins into. So I'll just do that. What I try and do is, when I do any form of macrame or micro macrame, I try and not, if I can avoid it, put my pin straight through my work or through the cord or thread. I try and do it in like spaces in between, or in between rows or something, just to not damage the thread too much. Then back to the leaf. We want to just make sure, because this is the last one that we created the last row with, we want to just make sure that that's nice and tight before we start. And then here we want to then skip the one colour. Like previously, I prefer skipping the first one. And then just do your half hitches with this one. So once and twice, like so. Finish off this row, flip your threads around, over your finger, through the loop, tighten, over your finger, through the loop, and tighten, like so. And to close off the very tip of the leaf, to finish off this one, you grab, again put your coloured out of the way, remember to put it underneath your other threads, and then we're using the last two of your base threads. So your holding thread, take that above the other one, and then the other one around your finger through the loop, and then pull that tight around your finger through the loop and pull it tight to close off that leaf, like so. So that's your first leaf on the second row. And now you can put all these threads out of the way just to join the other ones to the side. And if you want to, you can also, as you go, take your coloured threads out of the way. So try and keep it kind of as little going on as possible, so it's a little bit easier to organise and not lose track. So now you need to move on to the next leaf, and all we do is the exact same thing. You separate your threads out, get 6 ready, put the others away, so you have your last 3 threads from that leaf, from your second leaf on the top row, and the first 3 threads from the third leaf on your top row, because it will be the same thing we're going to do now. Basically make another leaf and thereby attaching these 2 top leaves together. So again, get your first 2 threads, bring the first one over the other one, and then make your half hitches. One more time. Making 2 with each thread, and then grab the very next one, the last one from that second leaf at the top, over your finger and through the loop. Tighten it over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. And we've now reached the threads coming from the very next leaf at the top. So grab the first one over your finger and through the loop, tighten it over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. Next one over your finger through the loop, and tighten it over your finger through the loop, and tighten it. And then the very last one here, out of the set that we got ready, set of threads, and tighten it like this. And again, you've now made the top part, the top row of this leaf, and we're now back to we need to fill it in with a colour. And you just keep doing the same thing. Like I said, I'm probably going to put some yellow in here, because that's the only colour that won't be touching this leaf, because that's up here. But obviously you can do it however you want to, so just continue like that. Finish this leaf off, mix the next one, and on this row we'll end up with 3 leaves. The top one we had 4, on this one we're going to have 3. So that's how it's going to be, 4, 3, 4 and 3. That's just how it naturally works out. Obviously it's going to be different if you make more or less. So finish off this row, and then I'll show you just how to start off the next row. So I've now finished off my second row with the 3 leaves, and I've kept all, as I go, I've kept all them little coloured threads separate to try and keep it organised and to not get tangled up and too confused about it. So we're back to then you just start a new row, and this is going to be the same row as the first one. So we're going to have 4 going from right to left. So again, we need to section our threads into sections of 6, because we need 6 for each leaf. So you take the 3 you left out in the previous row, so the very first 3, and then the next 3 from the first leaf in that small previous row. And now you want to basically start doing the same thing that you were doing up here. Get the other ones out of the way. So grab the very first one on the right side, grab the very next one as well. Those are the first two you're going to be working with. Take the very first one over all the others, because that's your holding cord in this row, and then make your half hitches over your finger and through the loop, and tighten them all the way up to meet that leaf. And then just put this one out of the way, and then grab the very next one. Make sure it's the last one from that previous leaf. You don't accidentally take one of the threads from the leaf on the top row. Over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, like so. And as you might be able to tell, I'm purposely, from the direction I'm holding my holding thread in, I'm making this row come down at an angle as well. So we now move on to the next one. This is the first thread of the last three. Over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, like so. Put it out of the way. Next one, make your half hitches. Now here, just make sure you don't pull too tight, just a gentle tension. Kind of keep your tension the same throughout, that's the best really. Like so. There, that's the top row done. So we now need to fill it out with a colour again. In this case, I'm going to choose red. As you can see, that's the colour that's kind of furthest away. Could go with orange, but I'm going to do red for this one. So fold it in half, get your loop, feed it underneath the second thread, not the first one, but the second one. Make your lark's head knot, push it all the way up, and then we'll cross them over to start caging in this row. So over your finger and through the loop, and tighten that all the way up. Over your finger and through the loop, and tighten it. So that's the first row done basically. Moving on, next one. Grab your very first of the coloured threads, like so, making your half hitches, filling out that leaf, finishing off this row, over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, take the next one, and as you can see here, they're a little bit looser from the very first row we did. Just make sure you kind of tighten them before you start making your row that fills out the leaf. It's just because it's the very beginning of the row, so there's not like extra support on this side. And then continue making this row. That's why when you're doing these knots to fill out the leaf, just do them gently. Don't pull too hard, because that will then, like I said, make your knots flip, which you want to try and avoid. Flip them around, cage in this row, over your finger and through the loop, like so. And then the last one, just going to make sure it's nice and tight before I start it. And leave out the first one and just do the second one once and twice. Flip your threads around to cage in this row, tighten over your finger through the loop and tighten. And then we're at the end, finish off this leaf. So again, still this one, the bottom side of your leaf is your holding thread, the other one you want to come underneath. And make sure you leave out your colours on the bottom, on the underside of your piece, over your finger through the loop, tighten that, over your finger, through the loop, and tighten it. And then that's your first leaf on the next row, which, like I said, this is going to be the row with 4 again. So it's always going to alternate like this because you're alternating direction, and obviously you want them to kind of stick together to make it all one piece, to not have them separate. But then all you do is continue, like so. Get your next 6 threads out to start making your next leaf. So that's all you do to make this, just continue until you reach the point that you want, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now reached the last leaf on this row, and I just want to show you something, because I'm now left with 6 threads, enough to make the last leaf. But what you'll find is you get the first 2 threads and then flip them over like you would normally do, start making your half hitches over your finger and through the loop. Get your 6, reverse 6, but then what you'll find is if you pull this, it will want to go all the way up below the leaf on the very first row, and obviously we don't want that, because if you look at the row that you've been doing, you want that leaf to start at obviously the same level as the other ones in the same row. But the problem is there's nothing here to like stop it. Like the other ones, they had the previous leaf on the previous row to stop it. But since we don't have that, what we're going to have to do is get out a pin. And then you put this pin in between the last and the second to last thread. So you leave the very outer thread on the outside of your pin, and then you put in your pin roughly about where the leaf starts, or you want the leaf to start, like so. And then you just basically continue, because this will work as a stopper instead of having a leaf. So you now just continue your holding thread to make the top row of your leaf, the other one around your finger and through the loop, and then pull it tight. Don't pull it really tight because you don't want to like flip around or move the pin, but just the same tension that you had throughout. And as you can see, the pin now works as a stopper. So I'm going to do another one, make my 2 half hitches like so. Put that out of the way, grab the next thread that's also coming from the leaf all the way on the top row, over my finger and through the loop, over my finger and through the loop, like so. And the next one is from the leaf on the next row up, over my finger and through the loop, and this will then be what connects this leaf to the previous row. So now you've kind of reached the point where it should be in place. I still say leave the pin in there until you've done the whole leaf, because it's just the security of it. Because while you're working with things, your knots can still slip and slide on your thread. Grab the next one, making your 2 half hitches, and the last one for this leaf, like so, over your finger and through the loop, like so. And as you can see, now that is pretty much level with my other leaves. And then obviously all you do is go back to the other side, get your first two, and just do exactly the same thing. It's no different at all from here, and then start filling it in with whatever colour you choose. So that's how to then really do this technique and the little tricks in between. So finish that off, make it however long you want to make it, and then I'll show you what to do next. So I've now continued doing my micro macrame all the way down until I've reached the length that I want it to be. And as you can see, you've got all the extra thread that you've attached, but every time I make one leaf I just push it underneath all your working threads and then up and out of the way, and just keep pushing them that way. And you can always use pins and that to help them stay where you want them to stay, so they don't come down and get in your way. And then we've now reached the bottom, so we've reached the point where we need to then just finish it off. And the way that we're going to finish it off is basically to make it look like the beginning part of the bracelet, where we just started out with a straight line where we just started working from. So that's all we need to do now. And just a little note, I like to always finish it on a row where I've made 4 leaves, or the most if you're making more or less, just to keep it kind of even and equal. So you start out with the highest amount of leaves and you finish that way as well. And then what you need to do is just, you're probably going to have threads kind of all over the place like me, but just kind of take your time and sort them out before you then grab the next one. Make sure you always grab the right thread. And all I'm going to do is make that straight line across right underneath the final row of leaves that you've made. And to do that, I simply grab the very first thread from my left side. You could also do it from the right side, it doesn't matter. I just prefer to do it from here, it comes natural to me. And I take that and grab it and pull it all the way over all the other threads. So you now have, this is going to be your holding thread throughout basically, and all the others, your working threads, are coming out underneath. So now you have that, and then you grab the very next one with your other hand, and that's going to be your first working thread. And then you just continue doing your half hitches. And when you're tightening the first one, you want to make sure that your holding thread, you keep that basically in that straight line that you want. And you want to make sure you do that every time you tighten your knots, because that's what's going to form that straight line. So you hold that nice and straight and tight, you tighten your first knot, make the second half hitch with the same thread, and then tighten that. Now that's in place, and then you grab the very next thread, make the same thing, do 2 half hitches with each thread going across. Keep holding your holding thread in that straight line when you're tightening your knots. And then just sort out your threads, grab the next one. We're just grabbing all the first ones that are coming out of the first leaf. So just the basically the order they're coming out in, that's the order you want to grab them. Do your half hitches, because that's the order if you were to make another row that you would naturally be grabbing them anyway. So just to try and keep it as uniform as possible. So grab the next one. There. And I think we reached the final one with this leaf. Over your finger and through the loop. And pull it tight while you're holding your holding thread straight. One more time. Over your finger and through the loop. So now we're basically moving on to the next leaf. So you just grab the first thread coming out from that leaf and just continue. And that way you also tie all the bottom leaves together, so they stay nice and secure. the next one over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop, and tighten. And grab the next one, you can find it, there we go, over your finger and through the loop, over your finger and through the loop. So you just basically keep going like this all the way across. Until you've obviously reached the other side and you've used up all your threads. Make sure that you grab all your threads going along. Try not to miss any if you can help it. Just have to undo that because my thread is separated a little bit. That can sometimes happen, like the ends of your thread or cord can fray, but you can prevent that. You can kind of, sometimes you can maybe singe the end a little bit, or you can put some clear nail polish on, or something like that, if you feel like it's an issue. Not all threads or cords are that bad for it, some are worse for it. But here it's just right at the end anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. Like so. So that's the second leaf done. So we now reach the third one. Grab the very first one coming up from there and just tighten. Over your finger through the loop and tighten. And just continue. So I've now worked my way all the way across from one side to the other and made the straight line going below my very last row. So that's basically this end finished off as well. So now all that's left to do is finish off the middle, basically the back of it, your leaves, all the excess thread. So that's the next step. So I have both ends finished off and they're not going to go anywhere. So what I'm going to do now is take my pins out so I can get my actual work off of the board. So we now need to move to the back side of it. So as you can see, we still have all these threads attached on the back. And those we now want to get rid of. So it might look a little bit overwhelming and there's a lot of thread that you have to deal with, but it isn't really as bad as it looks. You just need to start from one end, try and get the rest, kind of push it a bit to the opposite side, and you just start from one end. Don't have to start from a particular one, doesn't really matter because you need to do them all anyway. Like so, so you can basically see the first row that you've made of your leaves. So hopefully now you can see it a little bit clearer. At the first row is pretty clear, it basically only has the threads that are actually coming out from it. So now what we need to do is get out some glue. And for this I prefer to use Hypo cement. It dries clear, so that's obviously you need it to dry clear. And then it's strong, but what I will say, obviously it depends what you're going to be using this for. If you're going to use it, say as a bracelet, where this back side is going to be on your skin, or anywhere else where it's going to be on your skin or anything, I really suggest you get a glue that when it dries, it's still flexible. So say like super glue, I wouldn't use that, because when it dries it goes really hard and that could end up kind of scratching or irritating anyone's skin. So this stays flexible when it dries as well. So whatever does rub on your skin, it won't irritate. And also because this one, the Hypo cement, it has like a really fine tip to it, which is really useful for getting into right into the spaces where you just want the glue to go and not kind of get it all over the place. So now then I'm going to take my glue and then do one leaf at a time. I kind of grab the threads and then I just get my glue and put it on start on the top side. I don't go all over the leaf, I just go kind of right around where the threads are coming out. So basically the bottom of the leaf, and then I flip them over and just do on the other side as well. And you want to make sure the glue grabs both on the threads, but then a bit around them as well, so where they're coming out from. Because obviously if you just grab the threads, when you cut them off, you're just going to cut off the glue anyway. And then move on to the next one. Just glue around where the ends are coming out on both sides to make it nice and secure, so nothing's going to come undone. You probably won't do anyway, because obviously there's a lot of knots and they're nice and tight, but I always like to make sure be extra secure with things I make. Like so. Do this all across, and I will usually do a few at a time, just because you need to let the glue dry anyway, so there's no point in doing one at a time, because you need to let it dry before you cut it off. So it's kind of obviously to save time, do more in one go instead of doing one at a time. So that's the first row done, and then I would just do another few rows in the first go, but for right now I'm just going to show you. So that's just the first row done, and then I would leave that to dry. And then when you've let your glue dry, which this particular glue, it dries really quickly, but yet it still stays flexible, which is why you can then still cut it off now. So you let it dry, and then you get your scissor out, and all you do is just go in, obviously avoid all your other threads for now, and pull your threads up, that's what I like to do, to get your scissor as close to the base where they're coming out as possible, like so, and just cut. And then get the next ones, do the same thing, pull them up and cut. And then next ones, get your scissors in, pull up your threads and cut. And the last ones on this row, and cut. And obviously when you cut, be careful you don't cut off any threads that you don't want to cut off, or cut into your piece by accident. So that's basically the first row. And if you are unsure, you can always put just a little bit extra glue in there, but you also don't want to put too much glue on, because keep in mind that if you will be wearing it against something, and it's not really necessary anyway, it just needs a little bit. And then obviously just continue with the next row, or if you want to do multiple rows at a time to save a bit of time, put your glue around the ends and then cut them off when it's dry. And that's how you then finish off the back. You do that all the way in whatever that it is you're making. And then I'll show you how to finish off the bracelet. So I've now got rid of all of my excess threads all along the back side. So now we want to just cut some of these excess threads off as well. And you can either just cut them off if you feel comfortable, they will probably hold anyway, but I like to just go across just to make sure with a little bit of glue. Just run it along underneath your row of knots. And you don't have to be precise, because this will be covered up, because this will go inside the ribbon end anyway. So hence why, well, it's probably not necessary, it's just glue to hold it together, especially while you're working with it. So just a little bit of glue like that. Put the glue away again, and then just go in and cut off. Leave about 1 millimeter or 2. You don't have to get right up to it. And then get rid of all your excess threads everywhere, so nothing weird is sticking out. Because now the next step is to use your ribbon ends to actually finish it off so we can make it into a wearable piece. And so to do this, you get out your ribbon end and it looks something like this. It's basically going to clamp onto the end of your piece. And you can get these in loads of different sizes, so you just get one in the size that fits whatever piece that you've made. Now this one happens to fit my size. So let's finish it off. Now before I clamp it onto the end of my piece, I like to use some glue inside. And for this I usually use E6000. I think this is a really good glue, especially for this type of thing. You can use the same glue as before, it's just personal preference really. And the reason I do this is because in a lot of cases you probably don't need to put the glue in there, but I like to do it just to make sure that nothing is going to come undone or slip out. So basically it's just for extra security. So I get my glue, and then I usually get a toothpick and put a little bit of the glue on the toothpick. You don't want to get too much, because remember you're going to be clamping it down, and if you have too much glue in there, then when you clamp it down around whatever piece you've made, a lot of the glue might come spilling out and kind of go all over the place. So you want to cover your sides of your ribbon end generously, but not too much. So just enough for it to grab onto your piece. And what you could also do is get some glue. Again, keep it at a minimum. And then get your actual piece out and just put a little bit of glue along the ends on this. Because that way you definitely make sure that you're basically binding your ribbon end together with your piece. So again, it's just that extra security. Like something like so. And then you just get the ribbon end in your piece. You put your piece inside the ribbon end. Work it in there. Make sure that it sits in the middle, so nothing's sticking out, so it's nice and even. Like that. And then you want to get some flat nose pliers, because now you need to basically clamp it down. So you just get your flat nose pliers, you start on one side, do it gently a bit at a time, don't go all the way down straight away, because then you move across back and forth, and as you go make sure, check it's still in the place that you want it to be, like in the centre. And if you're happy with that, you can then start squeezing all the way down so it's nice and tight. Like so. And I usually like to come in from the other side as well. Make sure the ribbon end is grabbing onto your piece nice and securely, and squeeze down on the ends as well, like so. And that is basically your ribbon end attached on one end. And then obviously you just need to repeat the same thing on the other end, and then attach whatever you're using, jump rings, clasp and whatever, and you basically have your finished piece. So that's all there is to it. I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.